Hi, Scott. Thank you for being on the show.
Aurelian, great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
So, the first question I like to ask is could you please walk us through your journey as a real estate developer?
Yeah, great question. So just sort of starting at the beginning, I come from a family background in the real estate development field. My dad and my uncle were both in the business in Long Beach, where I'm based in Southern California. And in fact, our family's been active in real estate development in Long Beach since 1960. So I grew up around it, but I'll be quite honest with you. It was, as kids are, sometimes you want to choose to do the opposite of what your parents do or what your family does. So I graduated from high school and I didn't have a particular direction. I wasn't one of those kids that, was going to launch immediately into college. I think, kids today are much more, and at least that's how I am with my kids, our family is. So I spent a couple years working in the construction trades, doing electrical work, basically on apartment buildings in development in Southern California. In fact, mostly in my hometown of Long Beach. And as I was doing that work, it made me realize that I didn't want to do that for any length of time. I was making more money than any other 19-year-old, 18-year-old that I knew at the time. And so I think there's just some general underlying dissatisfaction. I mean, I certainly got to know construction sites and how buildings went together. So that's always been beneficial in the long run. But a couple key things, really three key things happened to me. So one, during that time period, I read one of those famous 50s era real estate investment books, how to make $1 million investing in real estate on the weekends. And that book taught me really what deal making was. So I came from a family background of real estate development. So I knew what real estate developers did, find land, design buildings, build them, rent them, sell them, right? Generally, that's sort of the developer's offer. But I didn't really understand the entrepreneurial part and really, how profitable they could be if you did them correctly. But that book sort of opened my eyes to real estate deal making. Now that book was around acquiring, houses and apartments and owning them and making profitability from acquiring existing assets. Second was that when I'm on the job site doing electrical work, when the developer would come visit the site, as developers do every once in a while, I recognized who that was. And it really became very clear to me that I wanted to be doing what that guy was doing and not what I was doing, working electrical work. And by the way, electrical work is probably some of the, cleanest, like thinking man's construction, right? It's pretty clean as far as the trade is concerned. And the third was a family friend of mine who was a high school counselor at a nearby high school where I lived at the time in Long Beach and still live now. Sat me down, family friend, was being a high school counselor as a mentor to me at the time that he was. Really sat me down and said, what do you want to do with your life? Like, what are you after? And I said, well, I want to work in business. I want to be a business person. And he said, okay, so do you want to be a corporate guy or do you want to work for yourself? And I said, oh, for sure, I want to work for myself. And so I'll never forget, good friend, he's since passed away, John Rothrock. He said, go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Now, it happened to be the school that he was from or graduated from, so a little bit of a bias. But it really, I think those three things coming together in the span of about a year and a half really cemented my direction really up to today, including today as being an entrepreneur, being a business person in real estate. So fast forward, graduated from Cal Poly, was able through networks to meet a guy named Mike Costa, who ran a division of a company that's now called KB Home, or Kaufman and Broad as it was called in those days. And this was a subsidiary that was created to syndicate and develop apartment projects. So new construction apartment development. And I knew for probably several months before I graduated from college, I had met Mike or talked to him on the phone, knew that was the place that I wanted to work, knew that I could get a killer education as a real estate development project manager. Assistant PM is the role that I took on ultimately. And so that, I was aspiring to get into business to work for myself. Started with a college degree, finance, working then my way into a corporate real estate development job. And then, a few years later, forming what is now my company that I run, Urban Pacific.
Okay, great summary. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
So you talk about mentorship and the role of this mentor. How would you evaluate the importance of mentorship and education for you?
It's number one, Aurelian. Real estate development isn't a business that is commonly known about. Like if you were just, somebody who was, looking for career, real estate development would not be something that, showed up for most people. In fact, I sort of make the joke, most people I talk to today who aren't in the business, they don't even know what a real estate developer does. And it's not their fault. It's just like, it's an uncommon career. People go, okay, so you're a developer. So you design the buildings? I go, no. I mean, I manage the design. I set the program, but an architect does that. Okay, so you build the buildings? I go, well, I manage that, but that's a contractor. And we hire those people. And they go, well, if not those two, like what the hell, right? So I basically, actually, my Uncle Mike had this example, and what he basically said is being a real estate developer is like being a conductor of the orchestra, right? For a symphony orchestra. Most people know what that, or at least they've seen it. And so, a developer, like a conductor, will pick the music. It's that person's, responsibility to deliver a finished, complete product, an amazing performance by a team of musicians. He recruits the musicians. He sets up the practices. He knows what a violinist should play, but he doesn't, or she doesn't necessarily play the violin, but they know what that person should be playing and how everybody should play together in each individual. So I think of a developer as an orchestra conductor for real estate projects, right? For building new buildings that people then occupy. So I'm sorry, I lost track of the question. Repeat the question for me.
The importance of education.
Oh, mentors, mentorship. Right. So really, when you look at then becoming a real estate developer, you have to learn it from people who are in the business, right? And, like I recommend, in fact, I wrote an article, if people want to look on my LinkedIn profile or go on our website, called 6 Ways to Build Your Career in the Real Estate Development Business. And it's like a few different groupings of advice, but one of them is get a mentor, right? And mentors could be a professional that you meet that you don't work with, some professional colleague, could be a project manager that you work underneath, right? Like when I worked at Kaufman & Broad, I worked for several really great salt of the earth, just brilliant project managers. But I think ultimately you have to learn from people who've done the business and are doing the business hopefully now. In fact, I always recommend people get a mentor of somebody who's actively working in the business. It certainly could be somebody retired, so I don't mean to exclude somebody like that, but you need to learn it practically. There are books on real estate development, but for the most part, they're not very pragmatic. They're a little bit more academic, or sometimes heavily academic. So, what I advise people do is find and recruit and attract your own mentors. Like find mentors at the places that you work. In fact, one of the advices I give in that article is go to work for a professional real estate development company, because what you want to do is gain experience, working for another company where you don't have the risk of personal loss, right? If you go out and be a developer from day one, which, people do it, but I think you're going to find that people will spend a lot more money depositing into the bank account of experience, meaning lost money, right? By going through trying to pick the right product, the right site, to understand zoning and entitlements that people need, financing. And, I'm crossing paths all the time with people who sort of decided for themselves that they want to be a real estate developer, and nothing wrong. I encourage people to get into the business all the time, but I always say, find a mentor, work for a company, maybe JV with another developer, right? You find the deal, and they have the background and the track record and the financial capacity. Learn from them. In fact, we do this quite often, where we're JVing with people that are able to, find the land and put the deal together, which, we want to, do development deals that are more ready than not. And, a lot of times it's just a straight purchase. Hey, we're just going to buy the site from you. But quite often I will offer people, hey, look, if you want to be on the calls, if you want to go to the meetings, if you want to learn, I don't know many other people that will make this offer, but we'll do that, right? If you want to be part of the deal, as an attractive element of the deal that we would make with them, for them to feel comfortable and, see us as a viable option for either purchasing their site. Sometimes it's a land joint venture. So that's mentors. And then just general knowledge. I mean, I encourage people, and in fact, I'd say this in that same article that I referenced, when you're first a project manager, you got to be a sponge. You got to read every document. You got to ask every question. One of the famous tactics that I used when I was working for Mike Costa is, we would have attorneys who would negotiate, purchase and sale agreements, limited partnership agreements, whatever, title review. And I would just ask them questions, right? I mean, I was obviously spending the company's money a little bit by having another 15 minutes of explanation. But, when you work for a company like that, they're usually going to have very skilled, networks of people around them, vendors, architects, civil engineers, lawyers, attorneys, all the people that are part of the team and the network of capabilities that you need to deliver effectively a real estate development project. And if you're a young project manager, you should be like asking tons of questions. In fact, you're asking enough questions, Aurelian, when people are sort of getting sick of your questions, right? And then you probably know you're asking enough. In fact, I have a funny story. I worked with a guy for Mike named Mo Mohana. In fact, we still keep in touch, Mike and Mo and myself. And Mo and I would carpool. And at the time, we both lived around sort of Long Beach and that southern LA County area, and we'd commute to Kaufman Broad's office, which was in West LA. It was just an atrocious commute, probably minimally hour and a half each way. And Mo and I still joke about this today. He goes, dude, you were merciless. We would ride back and forth in the car. And so he was like captive, right? And it would be like in the morning, I'd go, so Mo, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And then I'd go to work. I'd do what I need to do. And then I'd come back and then I'd go, hey, Mo, I did this thing you said, and you gave me that advice. And I talked to this guy, and then this other thing happened. Right now, what? And so it's poor Mo. It's like, it's like I was sponging him, taking all the knowledge from out of him, but it was good. So I would just encourage people to do that, right? I mean, I was so after trying to become knowledgeable and expert and just grow and learn and be effective, right? Is how the way I say it. So I don't think there's anybody who's going to be more responsible for your own learning than yourself. And you need to take that seriously. Like nobody's going to just, give it to you on a silver platter and just say, here, like, do you want to learn how to be a real estate developer? It's like, no, you got to be, really aggressive, pushy to some degrees, obviously get along and be trustworthy, that kind of thing. But, it's self-responsibility ultimately.
Thank you. And I really like your analogy of a conductor. What makes a good conductor from what you've learned and what you practice today?
Yeah, in reference to real estate, specifically, yeah. I think that there's a couple things that come to mind. One, I think just an orientation around effectiveness, right? Like at the end of the day, we can all fool ourselves to think, hey, I'm a really great developer or they're a really great developer. But at the end of the day, are you able to get things done effectively, right? So the analogy used, so I study with a group called the Aji Network in the Bay Area, founded by a guy named Toby Hecht. And Toby has this great analogy. He goes, the difference between understanding and knowledge, understanding is like reading a book about knowing how to play guitar or reading a book about how to play guitar, right? You could read it, you could understand, and philosophically and academically you can understand it, but to actually play the guitar is knowledge. Like, you can be effective in playing the guitar. You can actually pick the thing up and play a song, and right, good, bad, or indifferent, like you can deliver the results, right, at the end of the day. And I think that's really where, for me, as I look back on my career, and particularly where we are now, in the last several years, really, coming out of the 2008 recession, we learned lots and lots of good and tough lessons in the 2008 to 2011 era of that recessionary period. And really, at this point anymore in my career, Raylene, I don't care what people like, how they I want to be perceived as expert, right? But at the end of the day, I'm so oriented, really, 100% oriented around effective action. Are we producing the results, right? And that for us is producing real estate development projects, apartment projects that effectively house the tenants that we're seeking, which happen to be working middle-class families, and that we're producing a yield for our investors. Really, nothing else matters, right? We'd love to win awards and be recognized for our work, but at the end of the day, if I'm not successfully renting units to tenants who are willing to pay the rents that we need to achieve, viability, feasibility, profitability, and then, producing the yield to investors, then like, I have no business being in the business. Now, we do happen to do both those very effectively, right? The other the way I'd say it is that I think part of being effective is working with very powerful networks of capability, right? If I look back on it, for me, I spent a lot of my career developing my knowledge, right? And I would say that, I'm certainly have well surpassed, my 10,000 hours of time and practice and working in the business that, sort of Malcolm Gladwell says makes you expert in that space. I'm sure it's a lot more than 10,000 hours, but where I keep going back to, in addition to being effective, producer of effective action, is having people around me who are also effective, right? And networks of capabilities. That's what I call that, right? Capable networks, you might think of it. And that's everything. That's, brokers, vendors, architects, civil engineers, lenders, investors, people that, that I work with in project management roles, my own team, Urban Pacific's team, and really to be very effective and efficient in assessing those networks and their ability to produce effective action, and really moving people out of my network that are not productive, that are high cost, the way I describe it, right? Time, energy, money, lost opportunity. Anybody who costs me those things needs to be out of my network. And I'm not in a bad mood about it. I just say, look, I need to produce great, profitable, effective action projects to take care of my family, to produce profitable projects that have my company be thriving. And, either you're able to do that or you're not. And I'm probably relatively brutal in some sense of my assessment, not in my interpersonal action, right? How I tell people that they can't be with us anymore, but to really just make very, very clear, grounded assessments that these people are able to produce for me or not. And I have to for them, right? It's a two-way street. I can't be looking for effective action from somebody and then not pay them, or not pay them well, or not be a good person, a good self for them to interact with, right? And in fact, now in our vendor teams particularly, we're going on relationships that are 15 to 20 years long. An architect that we work with exclusively that does all of our workforce housing projects really is going on 12 plus years of almost exclusive work. And, all of our recent work really since, 2011, 2012, even before that. No, I take that back. 2007, Aurelian. So, 13 years, if I'm doing my math right. So, it's like building powerful networks. And then on the flip side of it, I obviously need to, not have people around me that are ineffective, but then I also need to bring in people and make good, powerful offers to them that are the best, right? And continuously upgrade our networks so that it makes us more and more effective. You know, in the last, we're several projects deep into our urban townhouse workforce housing model, and our Montebello project's under construction right now. And that is the fastest we've ever delivered a project. And that really is sort of the coalescing of good selection of team members, of networks, right? Good contractors, good design, good project management team, people who do our construction draws. And it's really, I'm not satisfied that we're complete yet, but it's to be really, effective, strategic, and competitive in building your networks of capability, such that they are not the thing that holds you back, that they're the thing, in fact, that accelerates your velocity in the business.
Thank you. So you've mentioned workforce housing. Why did you pick this niche?
Yeah, great question. So, we've always been a niche player, maybe call us contrarian. We always want to be where everybody else is not, but we want to be in a space where there's less or low competition, but that's still an effective space to operate, right? And so, over the years, we've always been an urban infill housing developer. Urban infill meaning we work in cities. Infill means that we're picking, sites that are in already built out neighborhoods that may be underutilized or vacant, but that they're inside the fabric of a already existing city. That's been our mandate, our business plan from day one. And in fact, that's why part of the reason we call ourselves Urban Pacific. We've had that name, since day one. And so that had us execute in several product types, but predominantly apartments, really almost exclusively apartments, a little bit of other product, but, nothing worth talking about. And when you build in cities, usually it's going to be more dense housing and, perfectly appropriate product type. But in 2016, so, pre-recession, high density, urban infill. Through the recession, we basically were able to, get all of our projects, at least maintained. And through the recession, I did a lot of real estate advisory. And then as we got out the back end of that recession around 2011, 2012, we returned to doing high density infill podium projects, predominantly all apartments. And then in 2016, we were completing a couple of major projects. So we did a 453 unit apartment project in Westminster, Colorado. We did a joint venture with a company called Lennar. Great project, delivered that. We're sort of done with that, ready to move on to something else. We completed a series of podium projects in Southern California. And in 2016, we were still in recovery from the recession, at least relative to the multifamily markets and the for sale markets to some degree as well. But the velocity and the activity was picking up pretty aggressively in 2016. And so late 2016, we sold really the last of our active assets at the time. And it gave us a chance to take some time and really consider what was going on in the marketplace, and really just being very vigilant. After 2008, it really taught us to pay very, very close attention to the signals and the noise, is what I call it, Aurélien. So basically, we're looking for signs in the marketplace that are subtle, because always when economic change is coming, when trends are going to change or reverse, the signs are there, but they're always usually buried in a lot of background noise, right? And you got to be really, careful and vigilant to pick those out. And so one of the things that we look for is oversupply in any of the markets that we're active in. And at that time in 2016, a couple things were happening. One, it was that almost all the big national apartment developers were starting to come into the markets that we were active in at the time. It was predominantly, really almost exclusively Southern California. So think like, LA, downtown Long Beach, Orange County, those kind of places. And there was all Trammell Crow, Holland Partners, a lot of the big, national apartment developers were coming in and active in the marketplace. And as part of that also was that there was a big increase in the pipeline of projects that were going to come online in the next, few years from 2016. And a lot of big, great, well-executed institutional apartment deals, a lot of really high-density podium product. And it's usually at that point in time that we go, okay, so this is usually one of the early signals for oversupply, right? All the big players come in, they capture a lot of the deals. They start developing. There's nothing to stop them, other than, the market and their own choice, maybe some entitlement stuff. But, that wasn't really, there wasn't anything that was on the near term horizon that I could see that was going to thwart those projects coming to fruition, right? So for us, we go, gosh, that's probably not enough supply to worry about absorption, meaning we said we thought that those units could absorb. But the thing was that if a recession came during that time period, those developers, the Trammell Crows of the world, would easily be able to handle, sort of the downturn of rents, change in valuations. And if you were a mid-sized player, regional player trying to compete against those guys, and you were delivering the same product at the same time that they were, product being, are they doing studios in ones and we're doing studios in ones? And if we were going to intersect with them at that part of the marketplace, they were going to be able to outcompete us. Better, deeper pockets, better cost of capital, bigger teams. And that's usually a signal to us to say, look, we need to be doing something else in some other part of the market. And so what we at the time identified from some assets, some land assets that became available, was a differentiated product, a townhome rental product. So we were able to buy a piece of land actually in our hometown of Long Beach, and we bought it from the city, and we bought very well. It was small land site, very, very cost effective. And so a couple things with that site, and this really was the precursor of what we now call urban townhouse, and also answering your question why we did it. So this site had this interesting thing where we bought it really well so we could experiment without worrying greatly about the project failing, right? Like we had plenty of room in the land value where we could experiment and, at least break even. Worst case was sort of the underwriting that we did. But the interesting thing about the site was that the zoning at the time, it's in downtown Long Beach, the zoning at the time restricted the unit count, but it didn't restrict the unit size or the program of the unit. So I gave the site to our architect and I said, see what you can do with this, right? I mean, it wasn't a huge project. And so he came back and he said, hey, although you're restricted by unit count, there is no restriction on the size of the unit or how many bedrooms were in it. I go, interesting. So we sort of designed together as this architect and I do. And we came up with a concept that was a 2-story townhouse product with a garage on the ground floor and a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath program, meaning that was the unit type. And so we said, okay, this is interesting. We did some research. The rent seemed to support the development of this deal. Again, we had this very, cost-effective purchase price. So we had a lot of room to maneuver. And so we went down the path and we said, okay, let's develop this thing. Let's see what this townhouse product does, right? And no one really does townhouse rental product at scale. A few players here and there in Southern California do it, but nothing at scale. And so we went down the path, finished the project, pre-sold it to a buyer. At that point in time, this is the early part of our demonstration phase of the urban townhouse business plan. And in that case, we were selling this project. So we sold it, and the person who bought it didn't want us to rent the units. Normally we rent the units and then sell the project complete, right? And fully rented, fully occupied, cash flowing. They didn't want to do that. And that was fine. Good cash offer. Ended up producing, I think, a 29% IRR on the development, IRR over about a 2-year period. And so we had underwritten the rents at $2,650. That was our assessment of what we could achieve in the marketplace. And, we were updating rent comps every once in a while, but at that point in time, we weren't overly concerned about it because the buyer wasn't expecting us to rent. So we didn't check rents for probably a few months before completion of the project. And so we sold it. So we had underwritten $2,650. Well, the next day, this buyer put the units on the market at $3,250. Like way above our pro forma, right? And so I called my partner in the deal at the time and I go, what do you think? Are they going to get it? He didn't think they'd get it. And I was like, I don't know. They might get it. Who the heck knows? So they ended up running some of the units at $3,250 and some at $2,950, either case well above our model. And so that deal was the precursor for workforce housing. Okay. So Why do we do it? Because basically this product type allows us to meet a sector of the market, meaning working class, multi-generational families, pairing that product with a private capital source. And this is the really unique part of our UTH or Urban Townhouse offer. And why we're doing it is because basically it's an deeply undersupplied part of the market. Really, there is almost nobody offering this housing type to large working families, right? Really, the only competition for the most part is houses that rent, and they're really not available at scale themselves. And that we could meet that part of the marketplace where it was undersupplied with a private capital source. In other words, we're able to generate really market superior yields to equity investment, that we now had a model that was viable. Hey, we can find sites that are in these neighborhoods, usually working class neighborhoods. We can buy land effectively. We always buy sites that are by right, meaning don't need an entitlement or rezone process. And then ultimately, where it comes down to as we develop the product and the research is that we came to the conclusion that these family groups were going to be exceptionally stable both now and in the future. At the time we were looking, we were expecting a recession was going to come. And the reason why, Aurelian, that these families are very stable is that basically because they live multi-generationally, which by the way is anathema to the American nuclear family definitionally of, two parents and 2.5 kids and a dog and 4 cars, right? Sort of the suburban model. That these families generally are 4 to 8 people. And the key thing is that they're a multi-earner household. So not a single earner household. Usually there's somewhere between 2 and 4 wage earners in the family. They live multi-generationally, so grandparents, older in-laws live with them. And the key thing is they share incomes and expenses across the family group. So they have these multi-earner households living in economic sharing lifestyle. And so what that does is that makes them very stable in almost any economy, right? In an up economy, right? An uptrending market or a peak market, affordability becomes their main issue, is that they're looking for housing that they can afford given the incomes that they produce, right? And these are usually 80 to 120% of median income, which, puts them really, squarely in the middle class. But then also we anticipated that in a recession, this multi-earner household structure would make them very stable. And in fact, as we've gone through this recession that we're in now, coronavirus recession, however you want to name it, that's in fact turning out not only to be true, but actually we're accelerating. The business plan is accelerating because we are the unit type that people go to when they move out of smaller, say a studio or a 1-bedroom single earner household. Let's say it's an adult child that boomerangs back to the family, or grandma moves in with the family. What they're doing is they're combining, or recombination is the terminology that we give it. So they're coming together now in our unit of now what we do, UTH is a 5-bedroom, 4-bath townhouse unit. So built and designed to rent, but lives like a house. Garage on the ground floor, 5-bedroom, 4-bath, brand new units, in-unit laundry, air conditioning, new kitchen, quartz countertops. So for the most part, the families that live in our units have never lived in new housing, probably in their entire lives. And they've certainly never lived in brand new housing that had 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. So let me stop there. That was a really long answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very, lots of information. So you've mentioned Colorado. What other markets are you active in?
So historically, we've worked all over the Western United States. So we've worked in, Southern California where we're based. We've worked in the Bay Area. We've worked in Portland, Denver. And then for a period of time pre-recession, we actually had an office open in Texas, Austin and San Antonio. Right now in the UTH model, we're only building in Southern California. But we do have designs and underwriting our business plan that this UTH middle income workforce housing rental model is viable in several markets in the Western US. So we'll build out and expand our office in Southern California. Our goal locally for this office is to develop around 500 units a year. And in fact, now we've converted. So our early demonstration phase, Aurelian, was we wanted to test the model, right? Nobody had done 5-bedroom, 4-bath rental housing. So it was completely really new an untested model. We've completed 3 projects in that demonstration phase. We've sold each of those. We've done 3 things in that demonstration phase. We proved the rents, that we could achieve the rents that we underwrote, that we could build it for the costs that we project in our pro forma, and most importantly, that we're producing either the sale value or the valuation for refinance and a perm loan to make that product viable, right? So we've completed the demonstration phase. We're now in our production phase. But about 18 months ago, we made a key change in one of the underlying assumptions, is that we now are going to hold everything that we build. And so in Southern California, we'll look to do around 500 units a year in Southern California. San Diego is the next market that we'd like to move into. We think that could do 300 units a year. And then we'll move into the Bay Area. We may go to San Diego and the Bay Area, in a different, sequence than I'm describing now, but we think 500 units a year in the Bay Area. And then, we've underwritten Portland, Seattle, Denver, and all those markets work for the UTH model. So we underwrote by finding a piece of land, doing an underwriting of, rents in the marketplace, build costs, fees, soft costs, and each of those markets are viable. But really, ultimately, we have a lot of ground to cover in California. And mind you, rightly so, one, because we know the market best, although we've worked in almost all the markets that I mentioned. But UTH really is a California story. It was created here. It's created by us. And it was really an answer to a fundamental problem that we have, which is that these middle-income families don't have anybody in the real estate development marketplace that's serving their lifestyle, right? Large family living at an affordable rate. And that's really, another fundamental tenet of the UTH model. So why I say that is because we have a lot of, progress that we can make in California by itself. We are so deeply undersupplied in this marketplace generally in California. Just, any product type, affordable, luxury, middle income, workforce housing like we do, that we are so far behind the curve in housing production that my estimate is I will spend the rest of my career doing this workforce housing. And that's all we do now. We don't do any other product types. And that, we probably have several decades of catch up in the California marketplace in order to sort of bring our supply and demand into relative equilibrium. The Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies did a survey or a report study in Southern California, and their analysis was that in the 5 counties that make up Southern California, there's a 1 million unit shortfall just in that region. And I look at that, Aurelien, and I go, man, we'll never catch up. So point being is that, we're fully committed to this product type. We want to own everything that we build. We believe in the model. We believe in these families, strong, stable, salt of the earth families. And we want to basically do everything we can to, build our portfolio of those units and be a long-term custodian of housing that can help these families, live appropriately and affordably.
And it's quite remarkable because you seem to be achieving positive cash flow in an environment like California, which is not what someone would expect.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. And I think the other thing that's counterintuitive is that we're accelerating in this downturn, right? I think everybody's, and we are sort of too, like we go, hey, it's a recession, so distressed assets should be where everybody's going to go. And in fact, we've been working on really the story that we tell about UTH, that in fact, we're one of those product types, a rarity, no doubt, that actually accelerates during a recession. In fact, we call it recession resilient, right? In other words, we're going to be resilient in a recession because of that family recombination into our unit, right? So when families get defensive, right, when they need to batten down the hatches economically, they're going to look for housing that can accommodate their economic sharing lifestyle. They already live this way. We didn't create that. But culturally, the development markets haven't, recognized that. I mean, the affordable housing developers of the world, the people that do what I call true affordable housing, which is government subsidized, very, very, discounted rents, far below market rate, below 60%, down to 30% in some cases. Those developers recognize, because a lot of the people that, rent in those, projects are families that need it. But the reality is, if you're a working family and you have those 2 to 4 wage earners, you're probably pulling down anywhere between 80 and 150,000. And that you now make too much money to be considered as an appropriate candidate for a, you know, below market affordable housing unit, right? You overqualify, you make too much money, but yet the development market doesn't serve you either in affordability, right? Let's say 30% of income. Or the other thing we find for families is that nobody's building a brand new housing apartment rental type that can, you know, accommodate a large family. You know, if you're a family of 6, you know, a studio unit or a 1-bedroom, which is the predominance of what's being developed in new housing in Southern California, does not serve your family. And there's nothing wrong with the developers that are doing the studios and ones. Gen Z, millennial are, you know, combined the largest single demographic cohort in US history. It's a perfectly appropriate market. But our logic, Aurelian, is basically in a downturn, those folks are young, they're mobile, they're living in a single earner household, or maybe they have roommates, but more often than not, they're going to be in that part of the, you know, life where they're, you know, maybe working a decent job, making enough to afford. But my, you know, in fact, it's proving out to be true in this recession. They're very mobile, right? If they lose their job, they maybe move to Los Angeles or Orange County to get that job. Well, if they lose their job, they are likely to go home or move to another market that's going to be more affordable, or they go to another market to get a job. And so you know, nothing wrong with that mobility. In fact, that's part of their life cycle. They're young, they don't have kids, you know, they may not have extended family locally, you know, that all those kind of things make them mobile, and it's perfectly appropriate. I just say we as a company want to rent to families that are going to be here and sticky and stable. So their kids are in school, you know, their church is down the road, their extended family all lives in the community. You know, we find that in the projects that we develop, most of the people who rent in a particular location are from that location. So when we're in Fullerton in Orange County, almost everybody who comes to look at the units is from Fullerton, right? People who live in Long Beach, you know, they're staying very, very, you know, close locally. And it just happens to be that our unit gives them the opportunity to expand, you know, do this economic sharing, you know, multi-earner household model. And it just happens to be that we can accommodate a better living lifestyle or better living environment for them in a brand new unit with, you know, lots of bedrooms and, you know, most importantly, lots of bathrooms, 2-car garage. So, you know, it's accelerating right now. And because of the product type, we're able to make it, you know, highly yield productive. On our 10-year holds, we're averaging, you know, above 20% on an internal rate of return over a 10-year hold period. So, you know, we're pretty pleased with that.
Thank you. So we've talked about what makes a good conductor, a good general manager. What can you walk us through the different steps, the different stages between raising capital through getting the building out of the ground and then the exit strategies? You've mentioned a few. You've talked about selling and then leasing and selling. Can you walk us through it?
Yeah. So you're meaning walk through like sort of like an overview of the development process.
Yeah. Very high.
Yeah. So yeah, perfect. Great question. So, you know, a couple things. I used to always start with land acquisition, but I don't do that anymore. So basically what I'd say to people is really first you have to come up, what's your objective, right? Like, let's say you're an investor or you're a developer, like what's your goal? What's your objective, right? Do you want to build single family? Do you want to build apartments? So you got to pick that strategy first, call it a business plan, right? Then, you know, what direction you going, what are your objectives? You know, I want to build X number of units. I want to have this amount of cash flow. So you got to decide that. And only then can you decide what the product type needs to be, because from your objectives flow how you think you can produce and fulfill those objectives, right? If you're looking to own cash flowing passive assets, you need to pick the product. I mean, this is patently obvious as I say it, really, but you got to pick the right product to produce that cash flow. But you know what? You know, investors who are not seasoned or developers who are not seasoned, they don't make good choices always. I mean, sometimes they do, but you need to first make it like a coherent choice. Like if I build these units, they really will cash flow. So you start there, right? And then once you know the program, right, I'm going to build new construction 5-bedroom townhouse rental units, right? That's our UTH model. Then I got to find land that fits that, right? I got to find land and location. So the first main thing is next is you find land, right? You got to, control that land. You get it under contract. Then you got to figure out, can you build the building that you want there? Does the zoning work? Is that location attractive to tenants? Will investors and lenders, lend in that particular area, right? An assessment of the neighborhood, they call it due diligence. Then once you finish your due diligence, then you're going to go into plan production, meaning your construction drawings, plan check. Now I'm skipping a big component in there, which would be governmental approvals that would come at the end of due diligence, and that would sit between due diligence and plan production, which would be your rezoning. If you had a general plan amendment, an action that we take sometimes in California, that's be where you do your subdivision. The reason I skipped over that is actually, for the most part, we pretty much only buy sites that already have that zoning correct and in place. And there, we do occasionally work on sites that have some additional entitlement work to be done. But I always tell people, look, if you can find sites that are zoned, you work on those. California has one of the most difficult zoning processes in the United States, hands down. We're the most politically resistant state in the United States, and hence why we're so undersupplied, per my earlier comments. So you do your entitlements, produce your plans. Once your plans are permit ready, you go out and get bids from contractors. You might hire a GC. We happen to build our own projects, so we go out to the subcontractor markets and get sub bids, get all the contracts signed, get your permits issued, then get into construction. Right, you go through construction, finish construction or near finished construction. You start pre-leasing the units. Once you actually finish, get a certificate of occupancy or C of O, then you actually go full speed ahead on leasing. And then depending on whether you're going to sell it or keep it, if you sell it, once the project's fully occupied and stabilized, it would be at that point, or, just before that, you would start your marketing process to sell it. So you hire a broker, you value the deal, you go out to the market, with a valuation and what you want to sell it for. And then because we now keep everything, the other path you go down is you still stabilize, and then you go seek a permanent loan, right? So from a bank or lenders that do long-term, multifamily permanent loans, you underwrite that. And then when your project is seasoned enough, meaning you've rented, 90% of your units for 90 days, 90 at 90, we call it, then you would convert to perm loan. And then you're in a property management and asset management story really for the rest of the life of that project until you sell it or something happens in the future that would change your direction. So that would be, a brief overview. I mean, there's obviously, infinite detail inside of each of those things that I skipped over broadly. Yeah, that would be, I think, a good general overview.
Thank you. So you mentioned in your own journey that you recommended and what you did yourself was working for a development company. Mm-hmm. How would you have any suggestions for the transition between working for someone and starting your own property?
No, that's company? A good question. So, I left, the working world at 32, which statistically is, those years from like 30 to 35 are usually when most people who are going to become entrepreneurs do. But I would advise people to maybe do it a little bit differently. And I went at 32, so I learned some interesting lessons that came from that. So a few just, piece of advice. I would save lots of money and have a good pool of, savings to live off of, because it will take you time to produce viable projects that actually produce money, right? Particularly in the development world, it's not unusual for a project to take, any decent size, and I'm speaking about multifamily development, could easily take 2 years, 3 years to find the project, get it ready, build it, lease it up, fund the permanent loan. And only at that point in time would you then be getting free cash flow from the project, which, could then come into your household. So you got to have savings. I usually recommend having at least 2 or 3 years of savings to cover your household nut, to allow you the capability to sustain for as long as you need to sustain to get the deal done, because 2 to 3 years is the number I give you. But let's say you've picked a site and you made the bet, and then the neighbors come out and resist your project in the zoning process, and now your project's 4 years out, right? So there's one. Say you have a deep pool of savings. Two is, I would look for creating multiple sources of income that are either related to your development activities, or even, I even advise people, hey, keep your regular job. If you're working a professional job, let's say you have whatever job it is, could be in the business or not in the business, as best as you're able to do ethically for your employer at the time, start your own project. Find a piece of land, develop, some small property, do a duplex or triplex, if you're going to do apartments. I don't say stick with doing duplexes and triplexes for the long run, but, get your feet wet on the first project without losing that source of income to cover your household. Because what happens is, when you're doing development projects and you don't have regular income to take care of your household, the pressure gets incredible. I mean, and a lot of people have to bow out at that point in time, because they can't sustain, that extra 6 months of delay. That if they were able to, sustain another 6 months, their project would finally come to fruition and they'd be making money. But because they run out of money 6 months early, well, they got to sell the project under pressure. They got to get squeezed out by their partners. And I'm giving, negative connotations. I mean, you might sell the project and make a ton of money. It's just usually the pressure is negative pressure, not positive pressure, right? So have savings, have, one or more sources of income. If you're an architect and you want to move into developer, continue to be an architect professionally, or, do architectural consulting for other people, right? Be an advisor. Anything you can do to create, multiple sources of income is going to just get you much, much more patient. Okay. One of the strategies that I tell people now is, maybe instead of leaving when you're 32 to go out on your own, maybe wait until you're 38 or 40 or 45. And here's my logic for that, Aurelian. What I found when I left at 32 is I had a decent network of people, but I didn't have the best network that I could have had I waited a few more years professionally. So if those years from 32 to 40, let's say, you're really going to start to be a seasoned executive in the real estate development space, and particularly going to start to be in higher level leadership roles, where you start to interact with higher profile people in the industry. So think equity investors would be one example that I really go to often. And so let's say you're a development project manager, and you're working for Trammell Crow. I'll just use this as an example, big corporate entity. If you're a high performing project manager or a VP of development, or even, maybe the regional manager, you're going to interact with very high level equity players, Wall Street people, large institutional capital sources, and they're going to see you performing well, or at least you'll work to have them see you, in a positive light. You're a professional, you know how to do it. You're a seasoned executive. And what I've observed in the industry is that a lot of people who leave a little bit later, after they're more seasoned and have better networks, is that they can step out into their own operation already having ready to go capital sources, because these people have seen this person in battle. They're battle tested. They're trustworthy. These equity people go, oh, I watched that person perform at Trammell Crow and they really did great. Now they're going on their own. There's not even a question mark about it. For me at 32, I mean, we had capital sources, but I really had to work for a few years really to really prove myself in the beginning that I had the capability to do deals. And, there were mistakes made. I'll be the first to admit. I think we've done really well over the years. And I mean, we're just absolutely thriving right now, even during this recession, because of the UTH model. But we learned lots and lots of hard lessons. So I might counsel people today to think about, entrepreneurs are like itching to get out as soon as they can. I mean, they can't wait. They don't want to work for other people. They imagine, calling their own shots is going to be better, and it is better. I will never, take that away from somebody, but you want to be correctly prepared. Calling your own shots is only part of it. What you want to have is high trust networks that believe in you, that have the ingredients that you need: capital, deals, lending, people that will partner with you, that, they look at this person, they go, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that this person's a proven commodity. They're proven performance. There's no doubt I'm ready to back them. And then they'll come out of the gate really, already having all these resources available. So I think, let me stop there. I think those are three big ones. And even if you have good resources like networks and capital, you still want to have the savings, and you still want to have multiple sources of income, because it still will take time for these things to come to fruition. So I think those would be three pretty important ones. Obviously, underlying all that, Aurelian, is knowledge, right? If I was somebody who's going to go out on my own, I would not leave until I knew how to do real estate development, like inside out, like the back of your hand. I don't know how to put it, but you would have deep knowledge with evidence of performance, meaning accomplishments, to say, hey, you took that project from the very beginning of the project all the way through to the end of the project, and you now know the entire process. You have networks of capability at every stage. You've sort of been seasoned in all the weird stuff that happens in the development cycle, right? It's very risky. And the risk is, no particular thing is risky other than really the market is your main, big risk that you just can't control. But, when you get good at it, you pick product types and you assess markets in ways that has you be able to be prepared for market downturns, right? Any developer who's caught surprised by a market downturn is not a good developer. You should be sort of quasi paranoid that, at any point, in the next 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or a year, that the market's going to turn down. And then when it comes, you've correctly prepared, you underwrote your rents correctly, you underwrote your operating expenses, you're not over leveraging deals, you're not overpaying for land. You've got good, clean execution on your construction. So you avoid construction delays that push you into recession, right? Even though you had your timing otherwise, planned out well. We knew, and this is why we picked UTH, is because we knew in a recession that these families would combine together. We had done the research. We knew that they'd stick around because all their social networks are strong locally, that they had these multi-earner households, and we assessed that those families would be recession resilient. And in fact, that's come to be true in the most extreme environment, coronavirus lockdowns, that we've ever seen, right? And still we're renting units, and still we're renting units above pro forma, right? Our Fullerton project, we underwrote last update in our pro forma, $3,500 a month for 5-bedroom, 4-bath, and we're renting these at $3,800 in this recession. Now, multifamily is relatively strong in this recession versus in 2008. Housing was hit first and hardest. This is a different recession, but we anticipated that to some degree as well, right? 2008 was real estate centric. All of our best economists that we track, and all the people that we listen to that are pragmatic, real operators in the business, or economists that don't have an agenda or a book to sell, said it will not be a real estate led recession in the next one, whenever it comes. But we knew it would be, coming at some point, the recession.
Thank you. Who are some of those thought leaders you follow?
Say again?
Who are some of those thought leaders you follow and listen to?
Yeah. So we have spent a lot of time developing our economic tracking tools. And so I'm just going to name some of them. So there's a great website called EconPi. So ECONPI, econpi.com. And those guys have created something called the bar graph. And the bar graph is a graphed multivariable economic tracking tool, where they will take something like 20 different economic indicators, things like employment, building permits, yield curve, right? And there's, a bunch of them. And then they'll take those indicators, each of the variables and the measurements of those variables, and they'll plot them on a graph called the bar graph. And basically what this graph does is it has 4 quadrants, and it basically tracks the multivariable indicators. And then they do something, what's called a mean of coordinates, which is basically a single point that takes all the variables into account and then graphs one point. I mean, it does show all the variables plus this mean of coordinates, but it will travel around the graph and show from these variables when it's in an expansionary quadrant, recessionary quadrant, right? Growth, retraction. And it's really been, to me, really one of the most powerful, economic tracking tools that we've ever seen. And there certainly are many. And some people say, well, I track this, I track that. And I go, great. The more, the merry. We look for ones that don't have any hidden agenda, that are not supported by somebody who's trying to sell a book or who's trying to get, written up in the newspaper, who's trying to sell gold, right? People who are like, have an agenda that has them give a certain economic assessment, but that's based on, what, not the actual real economic, the real economy, right? So EconPy, the bar graph, there's a great website called Calculated Risk blog that's written by a guy named Bill McBride. And Bill basically is a housing centric. He's not an economist in the classic sense. He's a retired Fortune 500 executive. But he's really in tune to, tracking economic variables. Again, this tracking of economic variables. But he's housing centric, so he has a good sort of pragmatic view of the world about housing trends. In fact, he called the 2008 recession. He and his partner at the time that wrote the blog had sort of seen the really oversupply of debt capital in the mortgage markets for housing, called that downturn, called the bottom of the market in 2011. And then he basically said that housing is in relatively good health, that his assessment that the next recession would be a black swan driven recession. He didn't know what it would be, but it would be some black swan event. And he was one of the people that I was listening to that said that this next recession is not likely. It's statistically much less likely that it will be a real estate led recession. In fact, his thinking now is that housing will actually lead us out of this recession that we're in now. So Bill McBride, Calculated Risk. And a guy I'm listening to like now in the last several weeks is a guy named Raoul Pal. He is a macro investor, macro economist. He has a website called realvision.com. It's a subscription, but you can find Real Vision on YouTube. He's not a housing guy, but he is a macro guy, right? So we're looking for larger economic trends, although he does talk about real estate, when it's, the right subject. And, he's a guy I listen to for just, understanding where we are with all the stimulus money. What are going to be the effects of it? What's the effect now and in the future, right? Listening to him a lot about what inflationary effects are we going to have from the stimulus money that's coming in. Seeing some of the tools that he's using to track economics. So he's a big follower of the bond markets, and bond markets as true measurements of the real economy versus the stock market, which, has clearly sort of disconnected from the real economy, at least over the last several weeks. It's been really healthy when the economy ostensibly is really bad. So he's tracking the bond markets. So those would be three pretty key people. And then I just, what I do, Aurelian, is I'm just an insane amount of reading every day. I mean, I love it. So it's not a bad thing, but I'm really just always reading from a standpoint of being vigilant. Again, signal from the noise, right? Like just trying to, look at all the background information that's out there. Look what everybody's saying, listen more closely to people that I believe do not have a hidden agenda, making assessments about how we plan. I mean, we converted to long-term hold for a UTH model like 18 plus months ago, because what we saw was, well, the housing market's relatively strong. Multifamily was doing great. Valuations, just like, very high valuations, low cap rates, great rent growth. But we were in the longest economic expansion in United States history. I think I don't remember when, but it exceeded 10 years. So that was just, to me, we were looking long in the tooth. That was a lesson that we took from 2008, just to not like ignore those kind of statistics. And although we don't make the entire bet on that, we just, one of the strategies or tactics, I guess, suppose I could use it, is looking for when people say, oh, it's going to be different this time, right? So in 1999, oh, the internet, there's no profitable internet companies, and, economic rules are suspended for the internet companies because they're different. It's different this time. Oof. And then they cratered. 2008, in fact, I still have a book on my desk of articles that were written sort of in that 2005, 2006, 2007 era, where people were like, housing prices have been going up for 30 years. They've never gone down in the long trend, going up this way. It's different this time. And so anytime I start to hear it's different this time, let's start to spend the belief in economic principles, is really a sign to me to start looking really closely, like what kind of, bullshit is this that people are saying? What is the agenda? Oh, the Realtors Association says housing prices are good and going to continue to go up. Well, God, they want to sell houses. Of course, they're going to spin it positively. We've been tracking the yield curve, right? And yield curve went negative, several months ago. We couldn't anticipated coronavirus as the trigger for the downturn, but gosh darn if that yield curve didn't, signal a recession. And here we are. People could, believe in self-fulfilling prophecies, but I think the economy was already having signals, or parts of the economy were already performing in a way that were signaling recession, for which the yield curve was just a signal of that, right? And that's sort of gets into that Raw Paul using the bond market as an indicator of the real economy, right? And yield curves obviously depend on the bond market. So those are some of those, and not an endless list, but those are the key ones that we track.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank
Scott,
you.
we've come to the end of this interview. I really appreciate your time, and it was extremely informative. What a wealth of knowledge.
Likewise, Aurelian, appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining me in the show.
So would it be okay if I shared contact info with your audience?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Great. So if people want to get in touch with us, go to our website, www.urbanpacific.com. I would encourage people to there's a red button anywhere on the website. Sign up for our Saturday newsletter. I think you'll find it valuable. We're pushing out a lot of information, articles that we're reading, economic tracking tools that we're making assessments of, some of the stuff that we talked about on Aurelian's podcast today. Every once in a while you're going to hear, a little bit about some of the stuff that we're working on internally as a company, but I think it would be high value content. I would also encourage people to go to the website and look under our investor education section. We have an absolute ton of content. I think that investors would find very valuable. Things like, how to, do your own underwriting, as an apartment investor, right? And looking at other people's deals. Again, market tracking, housing trends, economic trends, some announcements about what we're doing. And then people can find me on LinkedIn. I'm under Scott Choppin. So, I'd be happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. And then on our webpage, under the contact page, my direct email is in there, choppin@urbanpacific.com. And then you'll also find my cell phone number in there. I would encourage people to text me if they want to reach out. If you do text me, let me know who you are, and tell me you heard us on Aurelian's podcast. But I'm I'm open to talking with folks, and encourage people to have me as part of their network, and I'd love to do the same for them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Aurelian.
So